Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government has an update as to COVID-19 distribution and how the focus will be on frontline healthcare workers. We hear from a doctor in Calgary who explains why COVID-19 lockdowns can cause more harm than good. And it's official, homeowners in Lethbridge will not be seeing a property tax increase for 2021.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government announced that just over 25,000 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine are en route. Beginning next Monday, Alberta will receive shipments of the vaccines from Pfizer at dedicated vaccine sites across the province. These are in addition to the 3,900 doses that are expected to arrive this week and will be administered in Calgary and Edmonton. The province's healthcare workers will be given top priority. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandros says his government is confident in the vaccine that will be arriving very soon.
Now, no vaccine is 100% effective, but vaccination means that doctors, nurses, and others can go to work with less fear of getting sick themselves or bringing COVID home to their families or exposing their patients without knowing it. And it will help the healthcare system meet the extraordinary challenge of adding new spaces to care for the very sick patients who are still coming into hospitals in larger numbers every day. Now, as we know, if these critical workers are exposed to COVID-19 or become ill, their absence from the workforce is felt throughout the province. AHS has been busy contacting those eligible for this early distribution of vaccine and will continue reaching out to the expanded group to set up appointments for immunization.
Both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines require 2 doses. The Pfizer vaccine was approved on December 9th, but the Moderna vaccine has not yet been approved by Health Canada. The province says there are currently just over 21,000 active cases of the novel coronavirus in Alberta. Here in the South Zone, there are 583 active cases. A healthcare worker in Ontario is one of the first Canadians to receive their COVID-19 vaccination today. Anita Quidangan is a personal support worker in the University Health Network in Toronto. Ontario plans to prioritize the distribution of the vaccine in regions with the highest rates of COVID-19, with most residents not receiving shots until April. Quebec, meanwhile, is taking a different approach and will vaccinate residents at long-term care homes across the province. BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says staff at long-term care facilities and frontline health workers are the first in line for Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines. They'll be at 2 locations. One is the Vancouver Coastal Health Region and the other in Fraser Health. The Public Health Agency of Canada said some of the 30,000 initial doses were expected to touch down last night at 14 distribution centres in all 10 provinces. Health Canada is expected to approve the Moderna vaccine next, as others are considered for approval as well. The Manitoba government says it received 100,000 phone calls asking about 900 available appointments to receive their first COVID-19 vaccinations in the province later this week. Officials in Manitoba announced the 900 spots over the weekend will only go to eligible healthcare workers. The government says the first vaccines are for people who work directly with patients in acute, critical, or long-term care. There are also minimum age requirements. A growing number of remote Manitoba First Nations have put out calls for help to protect their communities as COVID-19 cases continue to rise in the province. Officials announced yesterday that 7 more people in Manitoba have died of virus-related complications for a total of 490. Another 273 cases were recorded across the province, including 50 in the north. The province's northern areas have the highest infection rate per capita. The Liberal government announced that it will spend close to $500 million to help with global efforts to provide COVID-19 vaccines to poor countries. The money will go to a program created in April by the World Health Organization, the European Commission, and the French government. Canada has now committed close to $900 million to the ACT Accelerator and has pledged $220 million to the COVAX facility to help buy vaccine doses for other countries. When it comes to locking down various communities during the pandemic, they can many times cause more harm than good. That's according to Dr. Marco Navarro-Gini, who's a senior fellow at the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. Dr. Marco says when it comes to lockdowns, we really need to take the Swedish approach.
It is impossible to stop them. And so the Swedes understood that if you lock down, you're going to cause an enormous amount of harm, you're going to open up, and then the virus will then again flourish, and then you're going to have to lock down again, and then lock down again. And they saw that this could lead to an effect of essentially an endless, potentially, numbers of lockdowns, which would cause even more harm to businesses, to individuals, and all those cycles of consequences that we talked about.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Marco Navarro-Gini and Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our newscast. A missing Alberta hiker has been found safe after spending the weekend outdoors in very cold weather. RCMP say the 45-year-old man told his family that he was going for a hike west of Nordag and would return by 3 p.m. on Saturday. Police say he lost his bearings and was not able to find his vehicle, but was located safely the following day near Siffler Falls. Police stress the importance of being prepared before heading out to check the weather and always let someone know where you're going. Lethbridge City Council voted 7-2 to adopt the Finance Committee's recommendations to amend the city's 2021-2022 operating budget. There will not be a municipal tax increase. Councillor Rob Miyashiro says they went into the deliberations with a goal of a 0% tax increase, and well, Council delivered.
It was a great process, and everybody said what they needed to say. Everybody got their points across. I think the debate was really a great debate on every funding initiative we had. We set out to do zero, and that's what we came up with. So despite any other comments that anyone could make about that, we set out to do zero, and now we have it. And I think that's a good thing for the taxpayers of Lethbridge.
Council also voted for a 0% utility rate increase for 2021. Last month, in a close 5-4 vote, Lethbridge City Council voted in favor of a $1 million budget cut to the Lethbridge Police Service. On Monday, Councillor Blaine Hagan proposed a motion asking for Council to reconsider. Now, that motion was defeated 6-3, and Councillor Rob Miyashiro reacted to the decision.
The police themselves put forward, I think it was over $3 to $4 million worth of reduction initiatives on their own. So when you balance all that out, can they still meet some of those reduction initiatives that they brought to Finance Committee, or not? I mean, that's the difficult part. I'm certainly not an anti-police person, and I don't think anyone on council is. But I think one of the things is that everybody's asked to take a look at their budget, and that's just one thing that came out.
The current operating budget includes $2 million for the Watch program, peace officers, and the Police and Crisis Team, or PACT programs. The COVID-19 pandemic may put a damper on the Christmas season, but Lethbridge Police are on the lookout for those who celebrate and fail to act responsibly. Video journalist Naveen Day visited a check stop over the weekend to learn more about stiffer penalties you'll face if you get caught while impaired.
Lethbridge Police kicked off its 2020 Christmas Check Stop campaign Saturday night in an effort to curb impaired driving. This is also the first year the police are armed with new sanctions under Bill 21, which allows them to administer stiffer penalties roadside.
Acting Sergeant Brent Paxman with the police's traffic response unit says the new legislation will minimize paperwork and allow more time to enforce impaired driving laws.
The new impaired laws will allow us to stay on the road more and deal with impaired drivers a bit quicker, because there's no actual arrest there, and so it's what we call a roadside sanction, and we can deal with everything inside our police vehicle and release them without ever having to go back to the station.
Some of the penalties include new fines up to $2,000, increased length of vehicle seizure for certain offenses, and repeat offenders may see new mandatory education programs, increased license suspensions, and an expanded mandatory ignition interlock program. Anita Huchala, who is president of the Lethbridge and area chapter of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, says she hopes the new laws will help people to take a second to think before they plan to drive.
We're always hopeful that people are going to be staying home and try to remain safe and that sort of thing. But there are going to be those people that do feel that they want to go out and still celebrate throughout the season, just as like they did any time throughout the rest of the year. But it makes it difficult for us to fathom that people want to put everybody at risk and be out like that.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
The late Logan Boulay will be honored with a national award tonight from the Canadian Blood Services. Honoring Canada's Lifeline is an annual national event, and it is being held virtually this year. Logan Boulay, who died as a result of the 2018 Humboldt Broncos bus crash, donated his organs and has inspired others to do the same. His father, Toby, spoke about how much pride is associated with an award like this for his son, Logan.
Out of this world amazing. To have a national award named after our son for these reasons is also amazing because Logan chose to be an organ donor. But to have a national award named after your son because your son passed is heartbreaking. I guess that's where we're at. It's amazing, but it's heartbreaking. But we thank the people of Lethbridge and the community of Southern Alberta all the time for the support they've given us, and they're supporting us now once again, and we appreciate that always. And we know that we're making a difference in people's lives that need organ donations and transplants, and that's what Logan wanted to do, and so Rick Suggett wanted to do, and that's what we're doing.
Thanks to Green Shirt Day, which was inspired by the Logan Boulet donation, more than 100,000 Canadians have registered to become organ donors. Family Peer Connections will be heading to the Piikani First Nation on December 17th to deliver food to needy families. As video journalist Micah Quinn explains now, the First Nation doesn't have a food bank, and this act of kindness will go a long way in helping feed those in need.
Trucks will be loaded with pallets of food items that will then be shipped to the Piikani Nation on December 17th.
And they have over 3,000 members that reside on the nation. We're going to go in the morning, and approximately 4 truckloads full of dry goods and frozen goods are going to come and be delivered. It's going to take a crew to get them working all day long to get the food off of the trucks and into the right positions for distribution. So we're going out with 115 pallets. That is over $1 million worth of food that is being directed right to a specific location.
The nonprofit is also looking for clothing and gift donations to give to family members when they receive their food.
Our wish list is to be able to take brand new mittens, scarves, toques, clothing into the program with us so that we can quickly put them into the vehicles with the families that are receiving the packages and the food.
Duhasek says that the nonprofit is very fortunate to see the community come together at this time and help out for a good cause.
Using food as a way to help families and individuals connect.
If you'd like to donate, you can visit the Family Peer Connections Facebook page. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Skip the Depot in Calgary has started a contactless bottle drive that will benefit the Lethbridge Food Bank. The goal of the drive is to have members of the community leave their bottles and a non-perishable food item for the Lethbridge Food Bank for Skip the Depot to pick up. All of the food donations will go directly to the food bank.
The donation aspect of Skip the Depot is a huge part of why we exist. We believe in giving back into your community, and we think that donating bottles and cans and food and things like that is an easy way to help support these organizations, especially during a pandemic like this where a lot of people aren't donating as much. They're not going out to deliver food as much and things of that nature. So I think today we've got over $435,000 donated from Albertans to Albertan organizations and charities.
To donate online, you can visit the Skip the Depot website. Some people take their holiday decorations very seriously, but the house you're about to see is taking Merry Christmas to a whole new level. Our own Loris Alexander was a reindeer in the headlights at the sight of all of the lights.
It's minus 15 out here tonight, but that's not stopping any of the cars passing by to come by and look at this wonderful display. There might be a second lockdown in Alberta, but at the Caldwells, Christmas is definitely not canceled.
When kids come through and seeing the magic and their eyes light up, that's what it's for us.
But there's another reason the Caldwells deck the halls with Santa and another Santa plus the missus and National Lampoon Santa. Even the Grinch made an appearance.
Thank you for sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas. The Caldwells are holding a toy and food drive until December 20th.
With the restrictions that came last place, it left a lot of people really short before the holidays, and definitely there's going to be a lot of people needing help that probably didn't even think they needed a month ago. I always come across these people that hate Christmas, and I just don't know what there is to hate. I think those people maybe focus too much on gifts or shopping, or it's really about,
putting a smile on
someone's face and just being nice to people.
For Bridge City News,
I'm Loris Alexander.
You may have noticed a strange-looking object on Whoop Up Drive in Lethbridge on the way to Indian Battle Park. An aluminum monolith was set up. Apparently these structures are popping up all across North America. Now, it doesn't mean that we're being invaded by aliens, but it does apparently mean that it's part of a publicity stunt about a new TV series airing on Netflix. Many of these monoliths have also been either taken down or destroyed altogether, such as the case with this one that was set up along Whoop Up Drive in our city. A note from the City of Lethbridge today that you will not have to pay at downtown parking kiosks effective today until January 15th. The city says in addition, 2 downtown monthly parking initiatives will be extended until the end of March. That includes a 50% reduction for the monthly Zone 10 parking permit and half off the monthly permit at the Lethbridge Park and Ride Transit Terminal. South of the border, presidential electors are meeting across the United States to formally choose Joe Biden as the country's next president. Today is the day set by law for the meeting of the Electoral College. In reality, electors meet in all 50 states to cast their ballots. The results will be sent to Washington and tallied in a January 6th joint session of Congress, over which Vice President Mike Pence will preside. The electoral votes have drawn more attention than usual this year because U.S. President Donald Trump refused to concede the election and continued to make allegations of voter fraud. The largest vaccination campaign in U.S. history is underway, with health workers getting the first shots. Relieved is the reaction of nurses who were vaccinated earlier today. Hospitals are rolling out the first small shipments as boxes of frozen vials arrive at locations across the country. The injections begin an effort to beat back the virus. The U.S. death toll is closing in on 300,000 people. How well initial vaccinations go will help reassure the public when it's their turn sometime next year. We've seen below seasonal temperatures over the past few days here in southwestern Alberta, but that should change. Things are looking up. Full weather details are coming up. It is beginning to look a lot like Christmas in many areas of the city. Here's a house located in the west side of town in Copperwood where the owners went all Griswold. I mean, have a look at some of the beautiful, colorful lights and all the inflatables. There's a shot of Santa Claus, the big candy canes. We'll zoom in on Santa a bit there and the reindeer. The owners, Sean and Sherry, say they like to do their part to decorate their home each year during the holidays to be an inspiration. And I tell you, it's certainly needed this time of year, isn't it? It's feeling a lot more like Christmas these days with the snow and cooler weather. Jeanette Roche is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, good news is that a lot of the clouds should be leaving us and we should be seeing some warmer temperatures later this week.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, after today, we'll be seeing those temperatures rise well above seasonal averages. We'll be seeing lots of plus temperatures, so good news for this week. Tonight, though, -8 right here is the overnight low. Going to feel chillier with that wind chill into tomorrow, high of 2 degrees. Tuesday is also going to have some wind with it, a southwest wind gusting to 50 and to 70 kilometers per hour. So a windy day expected for us here in Lethbridge tomorrow. Then after that, it's pretty much smooth sailing. We're going to see the mercury rise even more. 5 degrees the high for Wednesday. Sunny skies, sunshine expected to stay through Thursday and Friday with a high of 7 on Thursday, 3 on Friday. And then our weekend, we'll see a mix of sun and cloud. High of 6 for Saturday, 7 degrees is our high for Sunday. So we're going to be seeing temperatures well above the average high, which is 0. -12 is the average low. 16 was our high temperature back in 1997. And it was a freezing -34 back in 1948. 8:21 is when the sun rose this morning, and our Monday sunset 4:31 p.m. So 8 hours and 10 minutes of daylight today. Lots of precipitation expected on the west coast tomorrow. High of 9 in Victoria, 7 in Vancouver. Edmonton could see some flurries with a high of -11. 0 degrees is the high for Calgary tomorrow. Calgary too could get some wind, not as crazy as Lethbridge though. Their wind will only be about 15 kilometers per hour, so not so bad at all. Over in the prairies, they're also going to get those wind chill factors, especially in the morning, making temperatures feel way colder than these values. -17 the high for Saskatoon tomorrow, -13 for Regina, -12 expected in Winnipeg. Winnipeg could see a 30% chance of flurries as well. Over here in central Canada, overcast skies expected for Toronto, -1 the high, -10 for Ottawa. Beautiful sunny day though, lots of sunshine also expected in Montreal tomorrow. Now as we look to Atlantic Canada, we're going to see a lot more precipitation, mostly in the form of snow. 30% chance of flurries in all 3 of these cities right here. Fredericton, Halifax, Charlottetown could see some snow tomorrow. Rain expected in St. John's, Newfoundland. They could get up to 10 millimeters of rain. 2 degrees is their high. So there you have it. There's your weather.
Today's weather is brought to you by Supplements King in Red Deer and Lethbridge, Canada's workout and nutrition products retailer.
Canadian real estate company Royal LePage says the aggregate home price in Canada will increase 5.5% next year. Company CEO Phil Soper says leading indicators are pointing to a spring market that will favor property sellers. Royal LePage says in its report that unmet demand in the second half of 2020 will carry over to the next year, pushing up home sales. The report forecasts the value of single-family homes and homes outside of major urban markets will continue to see higher gains than city core condos. Pembina Pipeline says it expects earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation of $3.2 to $3.4 billion next year. The Calgary-based company has also announced a 2021 capital investment program of $785 million. It says it is reactivating construction of the next phase of its Peace Pipeline expansion and going ahead with a restart of its Empress cogeneration facility. It says it's suspending the $4.9 billion venture petrochemical facility due to risks to project costs arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. Canadian toy and entertainment company Spin Master will be getting a new chief executive next year. Company founders Ronan Harari and Anton Raby will step down as co-CEOs. It says Max Rangel is joining the company from S.C. Johnson & Sons in January as global president and then will take over as chief executive in April. Harari and Raby are expected to work with Rangel over the next several months during this transitionary period. Amazon-owned Zoox has unveiled its 4-person robo-taxi, a compact multi-directional vehicle it says was designed for dense urban environments. The new cab is shorter than a Mini Cooper and has 2 benches facing each other with no steering wheel. Zoox says it's the first vehicle with bi-directional capabilities and 4-wheel steering allowing for better handling. It has a top speed of 120 kilometers an hour and is being tested at its company bases in both California and Nevada. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 161 points in the day to finish at 17,387. The Dow was down 184 points to 29,861. The S&P 500 was down 15 points to 3647, and the Nasdaq was up 62 points to 12,440. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 47 cents to 47.04 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to 267 US. Gold was even on the day at 1827.36 US an ounce, and silver was also even at 23.84 US an ounce. Wheat is at $272 per metric ton, barley's also at $272, canola's at $5.97, and corn is at $292 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 15 cents to $113.10, feeder cattle were up 30 cents to $140.03, and lean hogs were up $2.45 to $65.68. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 78.34 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government announced that just over 25,000 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine are en route. Beginning next Monday, Alberta will receive shipments of the vaccines from Pfizer at dedicated vaccine sites across the province. These are in addition to the 3,900 doses that are expected to arrive this week and will be administered in both Calgary and Edmonton. The province's healthcare workers will be given top priority. Coming up, an interview with an Alberta physician who says the current provincial lockdowns are causing more harm than good. Hear what Dr. Marco Navarro-Gini had to say next in an interview with Jeanette Rocher.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought some division among Canadians with differing opinions on how to handle things and growing frustration and impatience with the lockdowns. Today's guest is a political scientist and a senior fellow at the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. He joins us from Calgary via Skype. Dr. Marco Navarro-Gini is the co-author of COVID-19, The Politics of a Pandemic Moral Panic. It's available on Amazon. Dr. Navarro-Gini, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, that's an interesting title for a book. Most people call this a medical pandemic, but you're calling it a pandemic of moral panic. Can you please shed some light on this?
Yes, the title has something to do essentially with what the book is about. In the book, we examine the reaction or the reactions to the COVID-19 crisis using the lens of this idea of moral panic. The idea of moral panic was published in a book in the 1970s, and it was an examination of people's reactions to drastic events. In the book is about riots. So moral panic occurs when a person, a group, or an event arises that poses a certain threat to society, to the existence of society, real or perceived, into the values of that society. So to my co-author and I, this is what seems to be going on here, that there is an enormous amount of panic, and we document and track the development of the arrival of the virus and how it has, for example, excuse me, first fueled, the panic is first fueled by the statisticians' models. We seem to have gone to statisticians to look at what could this virus do. And we seem to have honed in on the worst case scenarios in these models. There were many different models, but we chose the worst case scenarios. And then the medical bureaucrats chose to use these alarmist models to inform the decision makers and the policymakers, which is what has resulted in these lockdowns. So, and the worst part of it, of course, is that we chose the worst models, and we chose the models made by a guy who had absolutely terrible reputation, who had made many models for very many different things, and never had anything right. And that frames the problem in many respects.
So who is this person that framed this model then?
His name is Neil Ferguson. And Ferguson had a terrible reputation in the scientific community because in many of his earlier models, he was off by orders of magnitude, and they were always extremely alarmist. He eventually got booted out of the council that advised the British Prime Minister for sexual transgressions, but not because his science was terrible.
Interesting. Okay, so you say the spread of viruses like COVID-19 is actually not a new thing either. But what is new is our current way of responding to it. So what's the underlying cause of our different response this time? And is it possibly that model that you were talking about just now, or is it something else?
Yes, that is a component of it. Look, since the so-called Spanish flu at the beginning of the 20th century, this is the fifth world pandemic. Right? And in all the other pandemics, some of them have been really bad. Of course, the Spanish flu was absolutely terrible. We have never, ever resorted to locking down entire populations. This is a total experiment. In the past, and going hundreds of years before, when there were pandemics, we had the tendency to isolate people who were sick. And here, we think, or we argue, that induced by this moral panic, that the models were telling us that there were going to be tens of millions of people dead, that we decided to go and hide, as if one could hide from viruses. I mean, clearly we have demonstrated that it is nearly impossible to hide from a virus. And so what is different here is A, the panic that we have induced ourselves into, and B, the power that technocrats and bureaucrats have amassed for themselves and have been able to essentially push a single idea or a single panicky model in direct contrast and competition to all the other models and all the other information that we had that was way less alarmist.
So do you think politicians and media organizations tend to are they using fear and panic as a way of wielding more control over the public? Like, is it intentional, or do they genuinely believe that there's a massive health risk to the public and that they're doing the right thing?
The author of the book, Moral Panic, the original Moral Panic book, Stanley Cohen, dealt with this issue. And he found that just because a lot of people are making similar decisions doesn't really mean that there is a conspiracy. And we've had to deal with this in many ways. We think that there is an aspect of human nature here that pushes people to a certain kind of decision when they have induced themselves into a certain kind of fear and panic. And we see it, for example, in relation to some of the decisions that have been made by the medical officials. It's not that they have been conspiring against the public. It's just that they have been flip-flopping on decisions left, right, and center, precisely because, well, they haven't been able to figure it out that there is a way of doing things. And so, in addition to that, of course, they have overstepped their boundaries in ways that no one could have imagined. And so, there is a tendency among these people, to be bedazzled to some extent by all the attention, but they're real people, and real people always want to take advantage of situations to amass more power, to advance their careers, to move forward, if you will. And so that's what we see, that these medical professionals and medical bureaucrats have essentially seized opportunities to continue to advance their own causes, and in some respects become hyper conservative in some of their decisions because they are seized by fear.
And then there is something else that's concerning to many as well, and it's how some social media giants are censoring free speech. So if any medical experts voice a dissenting opinion from the current politically correct narrative, they're shut down because they're considered to be spreading misinformation. So why is this happening? Why are we letting this happen?
There is a real paradox here. Media are amplifiers of the moral entrepreneurial message. These people who have seized the opportunities to essentially send us into a panic, and so the media has taken that and amplified it. But again, there is a kind of division in a culture, and the media is a reflection of that. At the same time that we have, for example, media suppressing information because they don't want the public to panic, we are making people panic because they're suppressing information. We no longer live in a world where information can be totally controlled. And so the social media channels, for example, are home to many people who have different areas of expertise, who can put things to a lie very quickly, even when the public officials come with opinions that are, well, plainly wrong in many respects. And so there are attempts at trying to, and this is part of our culture, the culture of canceling, the culture of only having one opinion prevail, is what is driving these social media giants to try to be, in a sense, politically correct. In a sense, perhaps they do think that they're doing a service to the public by only moving official opinions. But we know that the official opinions have been just as wrong in many respects, if not worse than any others. Of course, then we always get into the other aspect. We talked about bureaucrats seizing opportunity to seize power and become more powerful. We have seen, for example, a prime minister in Ottawa who has taken almost every opportunity to circumvent responsibility, to try to push Parliament aside to make decisions. We haven't had a budget in over a year, supposedly because there is a pandemic, and yet there are countries that are larger, with greater economies, that are moving on and have budgets presented. So it's that kind of dynamic in which the social media channels are trying to only move official opinions, but the official opinions are either wrong or sometimes semi-tyrannical.
Now, you write about the approach that the nation of Sweden has taken, if we're comparing Canada to maybe other nations. So you write about Sweden, where they haven't locked down the economy, and many have been critical of that approach. But how do you see it?
We use the Swedes in the book as a kind of counter example, because the Swedes are one of the countries, and certainly the only country among social democracies in Western countries, that refused to enter into a complete lockdown. There are many social reasons in Sweden as to why this was done, but in a nutshell, the Swedes had been preparing for an emergency plan for 5 or 6 years leading into this. So when this virus hits, they have a fresh plan, is fresh in their memory, and they just simply went to execute it without panicking. One of the fundamental differences is that the Swedes understood that public health is not or should not only be dictated by one disease, which is, say, in this case, COVID-19, that they understood that there are implications for all other aspects of moral life, economic life, family life. They understood that there are, and there are, this was not news to them, that there are such psychological effects, that crime is affected, that human beings, families, violence against women, violence against children, are all affected by locking people down. And so the Swedes opted for a more measured plan, which was to isolate and try to protect the people who were most at risk and let the rest of the population move about more or less without any interferences. They closed down universities, they closed down high schools, but the elementary schools continued to run. They did not close restaurants, they did not close businesses, but there were some restrictions of social distancing and whatnot. So it's not that they did nothing, but they chose a more open way to deal with the problem without sending themselves into a panic.
And what were the effects of what Sweden has done? How have they been doing in terms of?
Sweden has been vilified for it because in some respects they have had a higher death toll than some of their next door neighbors, but they have done much better than places like France, Spain, Belgium, and other European countries. So really, they lie at the average. But because Sweden's policies put all the other policies of lockdown on the microscope, essentially, people have been attacking the Swedes almost gratuitously. What the Swedish case really shows is that we didn't have to lock down, that lockdown was a choice, and it was a choice that our politicians made, and therefore, they need to be accountable and they need to be responsible for these choices, for all the businesses that have been ruined, for all the extra death that have been caused. That's what they're trying to avoid by attacking Sweden almost relentlessly.
Right. Any thoughts on where this is ultimately headed for Canada, for the world?
One of the interesting things that comes out of looking at Sweden is that the Swedes had taken the time to think this through pretty much all the way to the end. And one of the things that they understood from the beginning is that it is impossible to contain a virus. Viruses have been around for tens of thousands of years, and they're job, so it's nearly impossible. It is impossible to stop them. And so the Swedes understood that if you lock down, you're going to cause an enormous amount of harm, you're going to open up, and then the virus will then again flourish, and then you're going to have to lock down again, and then lock down again. And they saw that this could lead to an effect of essentially an endless, potentially, numbers of lockdowns, which would cause even more harm to businesses, to individuals, and all those cycles of consequences that we talked about. So we should, by the way, be consciously aware that the vaccine is not a magic wand. The people who are sick are already sick. It's not a cure. And since we are not going to vaccinate the entire population all at once, the virus will continue to move. People have understood that the virus is not as lethal as they had painted it out to be, which has been a disservice made by the politicians as well, because people are not afraid anymore. You don't see the fear in people's eyes that you used to see back in March. People are trying to follow the rules, but are less fearful. They're moving around. You hear on social media, people are going to go and visit their relatives during the holidays. People are fed up with this. And so the propagation isn't going to end. My guess is that this 4 weeks that we're supposed to be re-locking down in Alberta are not significantly going to reduce the number of cases, and that once the vaccines arrive, it will take some time before this whole thing levels off.
Dr. Marco Navarro-Gini, thank you so much for your thoughts. Very interesting insight there. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Throughout generations, people have probed the Holy Scriptures in search of meaning, purpose, solace, and forgiveness. It's also the ultimate source of timeless leadership principles. Joining me now to talk about it is Joe Turnham, the Economic Development Director for East Alabama, also author of the book Leading from Our Knees. Joe, welcome to Bridge City News.
It's great to be with you, Hal.
Now, do you think our recent challenges in both your country in the U.S. and here in Canada have caused us to really look at leadership a little bit differently?
Without question. And I think, most people think successful leadership breeds peace and tranquility, but often it doesn't. And I think leading amidst chaos and destruction and pandemic and economic calamity is probably one of the greatest challenges of leadership. And I think it rattles the faith of those who count on their leaders to solve problems. And many times these problems are beyond the scope of simple solutions. And that's when we measure leadership with a little different yardstick, as you would say.
Or here in Canada, meter stick, that's right. Now, do we expect a little too much from those who lead us? Our mayors, our premiers, governors, like south of the border? What do you think?
Hal, I don't think we expect too much of them. I do think that perhaps we are maybe overconfident or over demanding in what we think the results can be from leadership. We talk about in the book a little bit that many times leadership is not making a good or a bad choice, but making the lesser choices that hurt the fewest or perhaps give us a chance for hope. And I think in these days that we have to allow leaders to make a few mistakes, because they will make mistakes, and many times they're making important measurements of do we reopen society at a risk of increasing infections, or do we let people lose jobs or get people sick? And these are not easy decisions for leaders. And I think that people sometimes can get cruel and partisan when leaders don't make decisions that they totally agree with, when in fact, if we're constituents of faith, that's when we need to ramp up prayers, and we need to hope that our leaders are getting good advice. In the scripture, leaders and kings and judges, they relied on prophets and advisors, and so I think that we have to look for our leaders to be getting the best advice that they can get in these days.
Joe, as the Economic Development Director for East Alabama, what have you seen in your present or past work with pastors, heads of state, or community leaders?
Well, that every leadership situation sometimes is situational. And I think a lot of leaders are in situations they've never been in before. I mean, in economic development, we have massive job losses. We have things are getting personal. Places with very high economic standards, people are going to food banks. So you have to recalculate. I think you look more internally. No person is left behind. You have to kind of recalibrate how you make decisions and how you prioritize decisions. I know economic developers are looking to, sometimes instead of recruiting, we have to rescue. And I think that's been a big focus. And I think as pastors or leaders of faith, we have to look at maybe not giving the solutions, but giving hope and getting in the right direction, the right frame of mind, so that we can come out the other end of this situation that we're in.
Hey, Joe, sometimes there are no right answers to complex challenges. How do effective leaders really navigate times of uncertainty?
Well, I think that good leaders exemplify humility, that sometimes the issues are beyond them. They reach out for help. They admit mistakes. They're able to change direction. There's nothing wrong in leadership with changing directions. If a policy or perhaps the situations change, leaders can change. And I think asking those that follow you, whether you're an elected official or whether you're just a community leader that, hey, we need to recalibrate today. We need to change directions. Maybe we got the data wrong. I think those are the kinds of changes that people appreciate leaders making in these days.
Biblical leaders were far from perfect, Joe. We all know that. Why does God often choose people who seem the least likely people to lead?
Well, it's throughout the scriptures. I mean, you look at, whether people were grinding grain or whether they were fishermen or whether they were tending sheep. I mean, God plucked out people of really modest means that never went to leadership school. And the leaders of today, sometimes their job is not to lead for a long time, but to lead through a certain situation. And I think leaders make mistakes. I mean, David was a man after the heart of God, but he numbered Israel. He committed adultery. He was an accessory even to murder, but he became a man after God's own heart. And the brothers of Joseph sold him into slavery and deprived their own flesh and blood of opportunity. And in the end, Joseph, when he's dying, looks around, he said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." So, I think leaders today, we need to pray for them, but I think also we need to allow good leaders to make some mistakes.
So in your opinion, then, what are some of the core attributes that make for a good leader?
Humility. Always look for humility. I think in leaders that have a heart of love and service, and you can discern that in the way that they conduct themselves. And we say here in the Deep South, where I'm from, that we want leaders that will be cross bearers and not crown wearers. That people that seek to do leadership because they know it's a duty, a lift. It oftentimes brings you under scrutiny and burdens. People that run for office or people that want the trappings of success or influence or that need the affirmation of power are usually people that I know will not last or be effective leaders. But a good thing is always humility and people that even have a sense of humor, that are able to be self-deprecating, because I think in leadership that it will overwhelm anyone. It doesn't matter if you're leading at the local or the national level. And I think that leaders also that seek the right advice, and leaders that have that heart for service. And I think it bleeds through everything they do and say.
You talk about being from the Deep South. I can hear that strong Southern accent. When I speak with you, can you hear my strong Canadian accent?
I can. It's very beautiful.
Okay. Why do you feel a real kinship with many of the characters and situations in the Bible?
I have been a political candidate. I've won some races, lost some races. I have been on the edge of disaster. I have met kings, queens, leaders, presidents over many administrations, and have been almost driven to my knees and in trying to understand leadership. And the Holy Spirit spoke to me to write this particular book because I think leadership is lonely. Leadership can destroy families. I've seen many people get destroyed financially, legally, and otherwise being in leadership. And so I felt like God wanted me to take these lessons of Scripture and offer them to people, because we're all leaders, and if we're people of faith, God will call us to leadership. Jonah didn't want to judge the people. Are you going to go to Nineveh or Tarshish? He didn't want to go in the right direction. But if you're a person of faith and God calls you to lead, he will pursue you until you answer that call. So, I think all of us at some point in faith will be called, whether it's to lead in our own families, which is the greatest leadership calling of anyone, to leading at in a network in Canada, or leading, a group of scouts. I mean, I think leadership, we're all blips of eternity. And I think, every action that we do will be measured in the fire of heaven. And I think that when we do things in the right heart and the right mind, and we love each other and we seek forgiveness. And I think in the United States today, we're seeking to understand. Daniel in the Old Testament set his heart to understand. And I think that leaders today, whether they and you asked me a quality of a great leader, is leaders that want to understand and hear the opposing voices and bring people to the banquet that have never sat there and hear their perspective. And I think for us to heal, especially in America in these days, love, listening, learning, humility, finding places of where we can agree and de-escalate. That's when I think the Holy Spirit begins to work through situations.
Now, in each of your 365 entries, you provide a verse from the Bible and a takeaway lesson. Can you maybe cite an example or two?
Sure. I mean, the title of the book, Leading from Our Knees, is actually from the book of Luke, and it's Christ setting the example of leadership. And it was Christ went into a mountain one night to pray, and it says he prayed all night. And when he descended from the mountain, he chose his 12 apostles. Big decision he had to make. Son of God, creator of heaven and earth. What does he do? He prays over his decisions, and I think that's a big takeaway. And the book is a read through scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, and we can see from the prophets and the prophetesses and the disciples and apostles, but Christ himself. He knew when to cleanse the temple and when to be quiet in front of a Pilate, and he can show us in our leadership journeys today how to lead a holy life and a holy leadership journey.
Jesus provided the best example of leadership, Joe. What do you see as some of the qualities that Jesus had and demonstrated that we rarely see in our leaders today?
Well, Jesus knew what his mission was, and he knew that that was going to be a lonely leadership journey. He knew he was going to be tempted. Leaders are tempted, and he went to the temple. Satan probably didn't offer him. Satan probably said, "There'll be no more plagues. There'll be no more death. There'll be no more tears if you follow me." And in Christ, that was a hard decision, but he quoted the scriptures. He knew the scriptures, and I think Christ also he loved people into the fold, but he also knew that leadership. There's nothing wrong with telling people of faith that there will be suffering in your journey. I mean, I also believe in prosperity and that people of faith can be rewarded by following the word of God. But if we are called to leadership, we will suffer. And Christ was a suffering servant. And I think that, I have not seen nor ear heard, nor has ever entered into the heart of any man the things that God has prepared for those that love him. And I think that if we as people of faith in this earthly journey and this leadership journey that many of us are given, if we will keep our eyes on the eternal prize, and that if we will love others as we love ourselves, and we forgive 7 times 7, and that God will lift us up and he will use us in the things that we do. And Christ is the perfect example of that.
Joe, can a person be a good leader and yet be an unbeliever?
Absolutely. And, I think that there's certain principles of leadership. I mean, you don't have to be a person of faith necessarily to be humble or to be caring or to love. But we also understand that the kings and queens and princes and presidents are but the footstool of God. And many times, we leaders think that they're affecting the outcome of eternity, but God orders the steps. I think he orders the steps of the faithful. I think he orders the steps of unbelievers. He's the God of all circumstances. So, yeah, sure. I think that anyone is used in leadership, and people can have the right heart, not necessarily know the heart of God.
So what advice would you offer parents about their own role in leadership within their families?
Be available. Listen, find times to put the electronics down, to do the simple things, to take out grandma's recipe. I think, in the quarantine here in the United States, I feel that it was God's gift to us to have to spend time with families. We're not on planes, trains, automobiles. We're forced to be together. That teenager that we can't have a discussion with, there are times that God's opened the door to have that walking down the street, or perhaps pierce the heart of a relative that is astray. And so, let's look at the tough times that we faced with the pandemic as almost opportunities. And I really believe even here in North America where we're having great social disturbance, that it could be a setup for a huge spiritual awakening in our country, where love and forgiveness and understanding and a search for justice and mercy prevail all that we do. Just as the genocide in Rwanda forced people, Hutus and Tutsis, to sit down and to understand, how can this happen? How can we heal? How can we confess? How can we make it better? And, sometimes a setback is a setup for God to work great miracles.
So how do you hope readers will use your book, Leading from Our Knees, and what kind of takeaways will there be for non-leaders?
Well, I think they're timeless principles. You can read the Christian texts, and they, they're about love and being accountable, and there are a lot of great principles there, just as there are in many faiths, in Buddhism and Islam and other religions. But I think if you look at it, that you will see that many of timeless principles that many generations have seen from great leaders are really in the Old and New Testaments of the Judeo-Christian texts.
Joe Turnham, author of the book, Leading from Our Knees, thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you, Hal. God bless.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.